So I was watching James Comey, and he's obviously the FBI director that Trump fired, and he basically claims that, this was a form of obstruction of justice. He released his memos to the press. He leaked them to the press through a friend at Columbia University, and that is what started the special counsel investigation, which, according to Comey, in his testimony, he said that's why he did it. He did it to get Trump investigated. So a very, very adept political operator. But what I was thinking about Richard Nixon, because everybody always says this scandal is worse than Watergate. But to me, you look back at Watergate, and Watergate really was a kind of bunch of minor crimes and misdemeanors. Nothing at all like the IRS scandal under the Obama administration. The only difference being the press didn't cover the IRS scandal. I mean, to take the most powerful agency in the country and silence your political opponents with it during an election year. I mean, that is a major, major American scandal, but they just ignored it, so it didn't matter. But they got Nixon. There was a higher level of honor. It was before we discovered that the bar of honor only applied to Republicans, not to Democrats. Once we discovered that, it all kind of became a little bit adjustable. But Nixon stepped down because he didn't want the country to descend into a constitutional crisis and impeachment hearings and so on. Nixon said this in his final speech as he was leaving office. And Nixon in those days was just an utter figure of disdain, hatred. Everybody hated him. The press had ginned up all this hatred against him. But he was a dark figure, but an interesting figure. And he made this final comment, which has always stuck in my mind.
Always remember, others may hate you, but those who hate you don't win unless you hate them. And then you destroy yourself.
And he was referring to himself. I mean, it was a very self-aware thought that he was saying he had come to hate the people who were attacking him, and that was why he was destroyed. And as they frequently said with Watergate, the cover-up was worse than the crime, and it was the fact that Nixon couldn't concede to his enemies that he had made mistakes, that he had done a couple of bad things, that it all kind of got out of hand, and there was all this, all these cover-ups, all this illegal action to keep the news out of the press, and he just appeared to the people as a liar and a kind of as he himself said, as a crook. I worried during the primaries that we were doing this with Donald Trump, that Barack Obama had gotten us so ticked off and the press had gotten us so ticked off that we were essentially had come to hate them and were throwing Donald Trump at them like a bowling ball, like the attitude basically being, we gave you George W. Bush, one of the most decent men, who ever was president, and you called him Hitler. We ran Mitt Romney, one of the most decent men in the country, and you told us, oh, he bullied someone in high school, he put his dog on the roof, and maybe he was responsible for a death that happened when a company closed. I mean, you just made him out to be a criminal. And eventually we just thought, okay, if those are the rules, if Barack Obama can abuse the IRS, if he can lie and lie and lie, if he can do all the things, and he can say he's going to fundamentally transform this country that we love, that we don't want fundamentally transformed, if that's okay and Mitt Romney is the bad guy, here's Donald Trump. Eat this, and I was afraid that this was going to destroy the conservative movement. And there's still that concern. There's still the concern that basically he's going to alienate so many young people from republicanism, from conservatism, that we'll never get them back. However, the one thing about Trump is that Trump equals Obama in the talent of making his enemies ticked off. And I have noticed again and again, I've spoken about this many times on the show, that the people who come after him destroy themselves. Marco Rubio with the fingers, talking about the fingers, one after another, the people who come after him. I mean, can anybody deny that Donald Trump has undermined the credibility of the press, not by his tweets, not by the shouting and the screaming and the yelling, but by what they've done to him? I mean, a year and a half of Russia investigation with nothing to show for it. Who would trust these people again? So I was thinking about this as I watched James Comey on TV. They've been building up his book that he's putting out, and it's this book about how virtuous he is. But really, there's not that much news in it. I mean, even Maggie Haberman, a Clinton loyalist at the time, said this. There's not that much news in it. It's like he says he has the story of Trump asking for his loyalty, which Trump says is untrue, but he's told that story before. He compares him to a mob boss. I mean, it's just vitriol, I mean, listen, we have a quote, just a little bit of this. George Stephanopoulos, who was interviewing him, asked him about comparing him to a mob boss. And listen to what Comey says.
How strange is it for you to sit here and compare the president to a mob boss?
Very strange. And I don't do it lightly. And I'm not trying to, by the way, suggest that President Trump is out breaking legs and shaking down shopkeepers. But instead, what I'm talking about is that leadership culture constantly comes back to me when I think about my experience with the Trump administration.
So I'm not doing it lightly, but it doesn't mean, when I say he's a mob boss, it doesn't mean he's a mob boss. I mean, mob bosses kill people, they rob things, they ask for protection money and things like that. But no, he's not meaning any of that. He just means that he demands loyalty to himself, and he says it's all about the family, the family, the family. So when you start there, you just think, like, it's just pure vitriol. It's just, I was fired and I hate this guy. And, again, not a lot of news. He talks about the Russian collusion story. He says, well, it might have happened. It might, these things might have happened. Maybe the Russians had something to blackmail him with, but I could say that about anybody. Maybe the Russians have something to blackmail Comey with. A guy like this who's so political, when he walked into Donald Trump and he said, I just want you to know that there's this story about you with Russian prostitutes. Trump probably wasn't savvy enough at the time to think about it this way, but Trump may have thought, like, oh this is like J. Edgar Hoover coming into me and saying, don't step out of line because I've got information on you. I mean, the guy was obviously playing the game for himself. So here was the big quote, as far as I was concerned, where Stephanopoulos asked Comey if Trump was unfit for office. And this is Comey's response.
And I don't think he's medically unfit to be president. I think he's morally unfit to be president. A person who sees moral equivalence in Charlottesville, who talks about and treats women like they're pieces of meat, who lies constantly about matters big and small and insists the American people believe it, that person's not fit to be president of the United States on moral grounds. Our president must embody respect and adhere to the values that are at the core of this country, the most important being truth. This president is not able to do that. He is morally unfit to be president.
So I'm sitting there thinking about this, and I think, okay, treats women like meat. I would say that sounds pretty true. Some of the crude things he said, some of the abuses he is, some of the affairs he's had with women, or at least they allege he's had with women. But also true of Bill Clinton, right? I mean, that was something that was true of Bill Clinton with the girl, young enough to be his daughter, on her knees in the Oval Office with all the girls here. With the one woman he was accused of raping, all the girls he was accused of grabbing, treated women like meat. Then he says he lies constantly about matters big and small. And I thought, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. We waited until there were moderates in Iran before we started negotiating with them. That was a lie. Bill Ayers, I'm talking obviously about the lies from Obama. Bill Ayers was just a guy in the neighborhood, not a terrorist who helped me start my political career. I never heard Jeremiah Wright say nasty things about America after 20 years in the pew. These are things that can be held against people. And I'm not saying that Trump is a good guy. I'm not saying that he doesn't have a case against him. I'm just saying when it's all on one side, it makes you just look like a political operative. And, in terms of Charlottesville, which I think Trump gets hit on this again and again and again, when you go back and look at the transcripts, Trump was in Charlottesville, was talking about people who wanted statues torn down versus people who didn't want statues torn down. He said you had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name. And when he said that there were good people on both sides, those were the people he was talking about. It's very clear. And it's just, was it tone deaf? Yes. Was it not the right way to put it at the moment? Yes. But that's what he was saying. And I just think that the politicizing of this from James Comey is just purely manipulative and political. And we know he's a political guy from the fact that he leaked information in order to get a special counsel to investigate the guy who had fired him. We know that that's the truth. It really is interesting. The Inspector General report on Andrew McCabe came out. The other fired FBI guy. And remember, the press was weeping and moaning that he wasn't going to get his full pension and all this. And it says, the IG report says, we concluded that McCabe lacked candor on 4 separate occasions in connection with the disclosure to the Wall Street Journal. 3 of those occasions involved his testimony under oath. So he lied under oath, but no one has talked about bringing criminal charges against him. No one has talked about that. He lied under oath, but no one is talking about perjury. The AP reports this, and I'm getting this from Newsbusters. The AP reports this. The Justice Department watchdog says fired FBI Director Andrew McCabe misled investigators over his role in the news media disclosure. And they talk about the lack of candor, but they do not put together the fact that he was lying under oath. And so all I'm saying is I admit that James Comey putting out a book is news. You want to hear the vitriol, but that's all it is. All it is vitriol. And let us not forget that when James Comey reopened the Clinton investigation during the election, remember at the last minute he said, I've found some new emails on Anthony Weiner's computer and I have to look into this. The press went nuts. I mean, the press just hated them. This is cut number 10.
James Comey is getting horrible advice. He is interfering in this election. I don't understand what the guy's doing, but just from pure political point of view, it is a nightmare for the Clinton administration, the Clinton campaign. I know why they're upset. They should be.
I think what Jim Comey did was to throw overboard Justice Department procedures because of political reasons, his own internal politics because of the hatred for Hillary Clinton within the FBI.
This is just the worst possible situation for the FBI, for the country, for Hillary Clinton, certainly.
Why throw that stink bomb in the middle of this, at the very end of the campaign? I think that's a real big problem.
It does seem like we have a problem with the FBI director.
Comey has said high-profile investigations make him feel pressure to do things quickly and do it well. Tonight, his critics are wondering if he has failed on both counts.
What we're talking about here is we're talking about being reactionary. We're talking about having a knee-jerk reaction to everything that happens according to what side you're on. And this is what I was talking about during the primaries with Trump. Are we being reactionary? Are we getting this guy who is a great big animal who's going to tear things down because we're so angry at Barack Obama and we're so angry at the press? The press does it to you. There's no question about it. The press makes me angry with their constant lies, their constant one-sidedness. But it's just, when you are watching partisan politics, this is what's happening. You should know all the time that that's what you're watching. And when the press is, as we now see they are, Democrat operatives with press cards, as Glenn Reynolds calls them over at Instapundit, when we see their Democrat operatives with press cards, we just remember they are reacting all the time. And Trump has this kind of magical power to make them overreact. I mean, even the Democrats, remember at this moment, hated James Comey. The RNC has put up a sign called Lion Comey, a site called Lion Comey. And so they put together this montage of Democrats hating on Comey. That's where the danger music comes from in the background. But the montage is perfectly fair.
Democrats have been very critical of James Comey, and many of us did call for his resignation.
Well, I was appalled by what Director Comey did.
Comey acted in an outrageous way.
He made a mistake. Maybe he's not in the right job.
Howard Dean, former Democratic candidate for president, says, quote, he may have destroyed the credibility of the FBI forever.
This was a very serious error in judgment.
The president ought to fire Comey immediately, and he ought to initiate an investigation.
What he did was unprecedented and outrageous, damaged the institution of law enforcement in this country.
The lowest moment in the history of the FBI.
I found it hard to believe that Comey, who I thought had some degree of integrity, would do this.
All I can tell you is the FBI director has no credibility. That's it.
So what you're hearing Democrats say that stuff. The press gives them the echo chamber, and then Comey comes out and attacks Trump, and it's, Comey, love that Comey. Comey is, really, you can just see, let's play cut number 4. There's a CNN panel. Just listen to the difference in tone suddenly now that Comey is attacking Trump.
We have been waiting for this interview to happen. Finally, James Comey is speaking out. This is the man who used to be the head of the FBI, one of the highest offices in the government, calling the president of the United States morally unfit. Your reaction?
Look, this is something that in any other time would be seismic. And I think even in this time where it's easy to kind of lose sight of things that are enormously out of bounds and enormously unusual for an FBI director, even though he was fired and he has, he certainly feels a sense, he says, of higher loyalty, but some retribution, let's face it. To say the things that he did about a sitting president of the United States is absolutely extraordinary.
It is extraordinary, but is it extraordinary vengefulness, pettiness, ego, or is it an extraordinary revelation? I mean, this is the whole thing about Trump is like, what has he done? If Mitt Romney is a criminal because he ties his dog in a crate to the top of his car when he's traveling on a trip, if that makes Mitt Romney, one of the most decent people in the country, a criminal, don't they have to cite something that Donald Trump has done? Don't they have to say, when you say he's morally unfit to be president and all you can cite are things that other presidents have done before him, but they just happen to be Democrats, you know, there was like, when you're caught lying while being a Democrat, then it's not as bad. Don't you have to say, like, well, come on, you got to produce the goods. You got to produce the goods. And Comey kind of says that at one point, which to me turned the entire interview, the entire event on its head. Comey says we shouldn't impeach Trump. This is cut 2.
I'll give you a strange answer. I hope not. Because I think impeaching and removing Donald Trump from office would let the American people off the hook and have something happen indirectly that I believe they're duty-bound to do directly. People in this country need to stand up and go to the voting booth and vote their values. And so impeachment, in a way, would short-circuit that.
So James Comey is going to explain to us, this FBI guy who got fired for leaking stuff, he's going to explain to us what our moral duty is. I mean, where do these guys get the gall? You know, where do they get the gall? Where do they think their position comes from? So now, you know, everything that Trump does is wrong. And even, you know, he sent a retaliatory strike against Syria over the weekend, almost immediately, the minute the Klavanless weekend began. They launched missiles. I think in Syria they should say, "Oh no, a Klavanless weekend!" We should, "Oh my God!" You know, and you know, the story is, the sourced story that was in the Wall Street Journal is that Trump wanted to go much harder. He really wanted to dislodge, make some political hits, and maybe even dislodge Assad and strike on his compound. But James Mattis talked him out of it and said the ramifications with the Russians and the Iranians would just be too much to handle. We'd end up having to go in. We don't want to do that. Let's keep it, you know, steady and just bomb one of their chemical factories, which they did. Oddly enough, it sounds like one person was killed. I mean, was nobody guarding the chemical factory? Did they call them up ahead and say there are missiles coming your way? So, and then he gets it from both sides, because he put out a tweet that said mission accomplished. And they start saying, oh my God, that's what George W. Bush said, and the mission wasn't accomplished. But this mission was accomplished, you know? I mean, listen to this mission accomplished. This is a montage. They just seize on this one thing. The tweet says, a perfectly executed strike last night. Thank you to France and the United Kingdom for their wisdom and the power of their fine military. That France and the United Kingdom joined in. Could not have had a better result. Mission accomplished. Right? Makes perfect sense. Here's the press discussing it.
Trump said the strike was perfectly executed and that the mission was accomplished. But some in Congress say the strikes didn't go far enough.
Kristen, this morning we've already heard from the president doubling down on his mission accomplished line with Syria. I know they believe the tactical mission was a success. But do we know what the strategy is on Syria going forward?
I mean, mission accomplished is a short-term declaration. And when you tweet about it, this is not the substitute for either a message or a strategy.
Mission accomplished. Those are loaded words in American politics and dangerous to use when no one believes one night of military strikes will dislodge the Assad regime or bring order to one of the world's most cruel and deadly places.
Well, George, I think it is generally not wise to use the term mission accomplished in an ongoing conflict. But if what you wanted was a limited, punishing strike as safe for U.S. and allied forces as you can possibly make it, with no unintended casualties on the ground and no escalation in the conflict, then the mission was accomplished.
So it's like the commentary is the mission was accomplished, but was the mission accomplished? Because it was accomplished, but is accomplishing the mission actually mission accomplished, or is accomplishing a mission not an accomplished mission, in which case it's not a mission? You know, and here's the thing about the way this narrative works. The whole thing with George W. Bush standing on that troop ship where they had put up the sign mission accomplished, and he was just making a speech, and so the camera caught that with the sign behind them. That itself was created by the press, right? If that had been Obama, do you think they would have made a big deal over the mission accomplished sign? No, of course not. Of course not. And they say those are loaded words in American politics. Who loaded them? Who loaded them? They did. So it's all their narrative playing back in this endless loop. It's in this endless loop. Not to say, however, that Trump didn't get some flack from the right for there's this whole kind of isolationist body on the right. You know, why isn't he building the wall? Why is he going into Syria? You know, these things have to be dealt with. You can't just sit by while they use chemical weapons. You can't sit by and let people be destroyed, you know, without at least making a comment, which is essentially what sending a couple of rockets over there is, you know, to say, you know, we're not going to stand for it. This is beyond global norms. You can't do that. So there does have to be. But a lot of people were upset about this on the right. No one more upset than our friend Alex Jones at InfoWars. Listen to this.
And then they sit there and they're like, you know, if you just turn against Trump, things will be better. But he was doing good, and that what makes it so bad.
I love the guy next to him.
I know.
Oh, and that's what makes it so bad. If he'd have been a piece of crap from the beginning, it wouldn't be so bad. But we made so many sacrifices. And now he's crapping all over us. It makes me sick.
If you can't see that, if you're just listening, the guy sitting next to him, Owen, I guess his name is, has this look on his face like he just sat, like he's on a subway and there's nowhere to move, and a lunatic just sat down next to him. His eyes are about the size of saucers. He's going, what is happening to this guy? So Alex Jones is weeping for Syria. Weep for Syria, Alex. But here's the thing. Here's the thing. And I'll finish with this, and then we'll talk to Knowles. You know, they had this raid on Trump's lawyer, right? Trump's personal lawyer. They had a raid. And what it seems that they're investigating is that this lawyer, Michael Cohen, made some payoffs to women who were threatening to talk about their affairs with Donald Trump during the election. And they seem to believe that Cohen got the money to make these payoffs. He got the money to make these payoffs by applying for a house loan to the bank and then using the money for that. And that's bank fraud, okay? So that's what they're talking about right now. That's everything I know from reading the newspapers, basically, that they have. So you're talking about the President of the United States. You're talking about the last president used the IRS to silence his political opponents. You're talking about presidents who have done things, you know, in terms of when Clinton was in office, in terms of China, that bordered on the very suspicious stuff that he did, the money he took from Russia while Hillary Clinton was doing favors for the Russians. All this stuff that doesn't count, it doesn't count, but they're going to go after Donald Trump for some payoffs to some women, which is probably pretty common in politics to begin with. How do we trust them? How do we trust them? And so there's this ping pong ball going back and forth, of this ping pong ball of reactionary hatred between the left and the right. And I don't see how it doesn't just keep getting worse and worse and worse until somebody, by accident almost, gets elected who actually has honor and decency and can start to talk to people the way people should be spoken to. You know, I mean, I'm not defending Donald Trump here. You know, I'm not defending his attitude. You know, he had all these tweets against Comey where he called him a slime ball, and he kind of, you know, stooped to his level. Slippery James Comey, a man who always ends up badly and out of whack. He is not smart. He will go down as the worst FBI director in history. Comey, you know, he says he's guilty of many crimes, which that doesn't seem to be true to me. I'm not sure what Comey did that was criminal. You know, it is this kind of dialogue where when only one side is expected to be civil, namely the right, ultimately, that's just not going to work. And so we have this reactionary ping pong game going back and forth. So if the left doesn't like Donald Trump, you know, I mean, my attitude to Donald Trump is his lifestyle has been egregious. He cheats on his wife almost surely. You know, the way he talks is egregious. He has a bullying style, but his governance is fine, right? His governance has been fine. He's been governing like a kind of typical Republican to the right, a little bit more conservative than the typical Republican. Hasn't done anything authoritarian, hasn't stretched the norms of constitutional governance. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm not inviting him to my house, but, you know, he's been a good president. He has been a good president. If the rules are, according to James Comey, that he has to have honor, that he has to always speak truthfully, that he can't treat women badly, then those rules have to apply both ways, okay? Then the lies of Barack Obama have to come home to roost. Then the treatment that Bill Clinton dealt out to women have to come home to roost. And Hillary Clinton's fronting for Bill Clinton has to come home to roost. Until that moment comes, you know, this is just going to be a ping pong game of lower and lower degradation as we react to each other. I just think, like, the press, it's all about the press. It's all about the press, because if the politicians were doing what they do, which is defending their partisan position, and the press weren't only playing for one side, it would be a much, much different scenario. So anyway, I think we should go back to Nixon and remember the people who hate you can't destroy you unless you hate them, and then you destroy themselves. And that seems to me to be going on a little bit on both sides, but maybe right now just a little bit more on the left. All right.